Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Stephen Minix to talk about data. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you for having me. Thanks for calling me into the space. Happy to chime in from San Diego.
Awesome. It is a bit colder here in Montreal, and it's rainy, but we'll make the most out of it. So as we begin, before we get into the actual data part of this conversation, I was hoping you could share your superhero origin story.
Ooh, I love the topic. I think my superhero origin story, if I had to be very, very brief about it, perpetual positivity pays off. I just believe in the idea of possible and things happening. And so I would say that I really was tasked with living in my superpower when I lost $8 million in grant funds one day. I was running after school programs for a bunch of kids in Los Angeles. And after the market crash in '08, a bunch of money that was available for after school programs across the country dwindled down from about 119 million down to about 18. So it became competitive. And I lost on a major grant renewal to fund programs for kids. And I had to learn very quickly what ownership looks like, what accountability looks like, what facing the moment looks like, and having to go talk to a lot of parents. And so leaning on my perpetual positivity, I was able to explain to them how I could backfill, what I could do to make it happen, and how I could make sure we service their kids. So I was forced into sharpening the saw of my perpetual positivity superpower as it related to kids getting impacted by programs. So that's my origin story, and I have it tattooed on the inside of my skull as never to make that mistake again.
You were also a teacher for a little while, as I remember from our previous conversation. I'm curious to know how that has kind of shaped your perception of how you see things in nonprofits and how you see, maybe even as we get into the data conversation, like how does the past experience help you today, I guess is the general question to ask.
Oh, I got to be honest. I think me being a high school PE teacher, physical education specifically, is another superpower. Because what I do now, I talk to foundations, nonprofits, impact investors, and we try to get them to work together, right? Use information and relationships to work together. Well, what do you do in a PE class? What do you do as a coach? You try to get groups of people to work together on an objective, the game, the practice, the skill. And so because of that, I don't come at this as academically superior. I come at this as possible, period. And I think that's what a lot of this world struggles with is the experts tend to over intellectualize things and they lose the room when they're trying to get people to go with them. And I think PE teachers and high school teachers, if done right, they're not trying to leave the room. They're trying to be with the room. They're trying to use their skills to facilitate, to talk, to learn, to inspire, whatever it is, to guide in concert with the collective of people in the room to do something. And so, high school PE teaching, one of my favorite things to say to folks when I get on stage is, I bet you didn't think you'd be listening to a high school PE teacher basketball coach talking about data and improvement. And folks usually get a giggle out of it. And then I kind of walk them down into my zone of like, you weren't supposed to. This isn't college. You're not being talked down to. You're being inspired to learn with. And then that plays into like, wow, this feels different. Exactly. It should, because everything that we've done to date hasn't been that awesome. Right? How about we create some awesome? And I think teachers think that way if they're really invested in the idea of learning.
I can imagine too, as being a teacher, especially like you said, PE, there's a certain concept of making sure everyone's participating, that no one is just in the corner standing alone and not involved, and making sure that everybody's moving together as a unit, whatever that objective is. So you are looking for harmony, you're looking for contribution. And those, I imagine, are also good skills that you can bring to the table today.
Oh, you nailed it. It's harmony. It's like song sheet. It's song sheet. It's like a rhythm. It's a vibe. People, when you're in space and it works, you're like, man, that was fun. Wow. That felt cool. It was cool listening. Either you're absorbing, listening to somebody, or you're sharing. And one of the things I talk about is the law of mobility. If what we're doing for you isn't helping you, get up, kick rocks. And not like you're kicked out, but like go find something that fuels you. But like when you come into a shared space as an adult that has kids, life, work, responsibilities, dreams, all the things, well, then what you don't want to do is put them into a session and treat them like they are a adolescent student where you're going to talk down to them and give them information to make them smarter. That's not it. It's adult learners need to be inspired to do something better immediately because they have the trains are already moving. And so when you work with people and you make sure you're calling people into the space and making sure you're centering the voices of the room, and I'm not talking about if there's 10 people, 10 questions to 10 individuals. I'm talking about finding a way to vacillate in the room and make sure that the folks that are in the back that are just absorbing aren't left on the sidelines, right?
Right.
And so finding a way to do participation and engagement and things that kind of banana in the tailpipe trick people into participating, because when you're in a shared space as adults learning, it's only as rich and engaging as the people contributing to it. So you don't need a talking head, you need a facilitator.
Right.
And then get these folks doing the work, sharing their human testimony. That's the magic. And then you use that to inspire, well, what can we do with that? And I think that's kind of a lot of the part to your point earlier about harmony. And I don't mean utopia. No, 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 no. It's not utopia because we're diving into some stuff. It's harmony. It's like the idea that you got something to offer, I got something that I'm trying to learn, and vice versa. And how do we do that in concert with each other so that we feel like we're working together towards a better something?
So one more question before we jump into the actual data part of the
Sure.
conversation. But you raised a point that I wanted to underline is that like most therapists, when they're helping you, it's not that they're giving you the answers. They're just facilitating a way to get the answers out of your own
Sir.
consciousness. And I see, by being a guide like that, you're helping organizations solve their own problems. And yes, I'm sure you got guardrails to make sure they don't go off the tracks too far. But the idea is that it's just about eliciting their own solutions to their own problems that are in there, and then making sure what are the triggers that can make that happen. I think that's also a big part of what you can do,
That's
right?
it. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. Because, like, look, I mean, I go to a dentist to get help with my teeth, right? They have a hard skill. They know exactly what they're doing. They're experts. I go to them. I don't go to somebody that thinks they know that they also have nice teeth to fix my teeth. I go to a dentist, right? So when you come into taking that example, if you go into a space where people are doing social enterprise work, nonprofit, NGO work, if they're doing that kind of work, they're kind of experts on their domain. What they might not be experts though is the administration of that work. They're not
Mm.
all like not all social entrepreneurs that run nonprofits or NGOs truly wanted to run a business. They kind of cared about the issue area. Some cared about the business, but most care about the issue area. How many young people are now gainfully employed, or how many women are in the workforce that weren't before, whatever their issue area is. And then they play in the space of NGO and NPO because that's where they can do it and have relevance. But the P&L and all this paperwork and administration sometimes gets in the way. So sometimes it's as simple as saying, what is the sausage making of the work that you have to do that gets in the way of you being able to be out in the community doing the work you want to be doing? And they always say things like, marketing or fundraising, data. Great. Well, how about if we could streamline that for you in a way that allows you to get your time back? What are you going to do with it? That's what I usually talk to people about. So what are you going to do with your time back once I give it to you? And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, you get 5 hours more of a day in a week. What are you going to do with it? You're going to work out? Are you going to take care of yourself? Are you going to read more? Because then you get them thinking about the possible, and then I can back them in to the thing they've already identified that was a struggle point of theirs, data collection, whatever. And then we can talk about how we can streamline that and nip that in the bud so that you can get back into your position of power that you want to be in. But that comes from questions back and forth with folks. And usually folks will elevate the solutions to their own problems if you give them the right sequencing of questions that say, so how does that feel when that happens? Right. And you're not trying to be funny. You're trying to actually get them to nail the issue, which is this is my pain point. This is what it causes for me. And I'd like to fix it. Great. Let's talk about that. And then we dive in. So you're right. And if adults don't have agency in their improvement, it doesn't stick. That's why fitness plans fall apart all the time,
Right.
right? Because someone gave it to them. There's no sweat equity in coming up with a solution. It's like, do this. And now it's a discipline play. Am I disciplined to do what I was told to do when nobody's there telling you what to do? Versus I co-created with you through the solutioning questions that now you feel agency in this solution that we've come up with, and now you're more likely through ownership to adopt it. And I think that's the holy, or excuse me, that's kind of the secret sauce of motivating adults, I think.
As promised, let's jump into data because this is
Do it.
we could talk. I mean, there's a lot of threads that you mentioned that we could pull on, but it's not what we're trying to achieve here
Sure.
today. So let's talk about data. I'm curious to know from your perspective, what is the problem that you see with data these days, specifically in the nonprofit sector?
Looking for data to validate. It's data validation. It's not data to inspire or learn, right? I think that's the quagmire that exists in impact space, and impact philanthropy, nonprofit, et cetera, social services. Folks look for the annual report. Tell me that you did perfect with the investment I gave you so that you can then line back up for this RFP and hopefully get access to more of my money by doing what I told you to do, right? It becomes this validation play. And I often say to people that have kids, I say, if you have kids, raise your hand. Great. If you have kids that are in school learning to read still, raise your hand. And, primary age or parents with primary age kids, raise your hand. And I say, would you wait until the end of the school year to find out if your kid could read? They say, no, of course not. Of course I wouldn't. I'm like, why not? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just wait? The experts are tending to your kid. You don't need to do anything. They doing. Would you wait? Like, no, no. I say, what do you do then? Like, oh, well, we read to our kids. Our kids read to us. There's walk around progress reports. There's parent meetings with a teacher. There's a lot of checkpoints along the way to validate or verify that progress is being made or if there's areas of improvement. So if we looked at nonprofit data, like we look at young people learning to read, our own children, we would immediately change the way we approach data. Immediately, because if you take away that example, like, or excuse me, if you take away the reading example away from this conversation we're having, and you just say, how do you look at information? They look at it to report. They look at it to turn it into somebody so they can get more money. It ends up being a validation thing to keep their resources going. Oftentimes, what we hope to have happen is organizations starting to do things like, I use information to validate our program model. I use information to look at data to determine whether we're progressing towards the outcomes that we aspire to have in our logic model, because that ties to the why, and the why. Why do you look at this information? Why do you want this information? Why do you run this organization? If you start asking why more often, you'll start to get into the answers that need data to back them up as an evidence. Now your data maps to your why, which then brings a circle home of like, oh, this information actually is fuel, not gospel, right? A lot of times nonprofits look for a data point that says, I figured it out. It's not for them, it's for the person they're going to go ask money from. I was recently in a conversation with a very established nonprofit executive in San Diego, and he said just so perfectly that fundraising is never a goal of mine. It's a derivative, it's a follow on activity for a quality program. If I run a quality program and my data is pointed at my outcomes, funding will come because I can map to why I do X, how we do Y, and why you need to fund it. And it was so simple, right? It's so simple. He's like, data becomes the evidence, not the destination. And I think that's sometimes what nonprofits struggle with. And it's not because of their own doing. It's because of the people that fund them that perpetuate some of this. And I think there's a way to kind of absolve and solve that space a little bit so it can be more about learning.
I'm a techie, right? So data to me is my playground,
Sure,
especially accuracy and data-driven decisions.
sure,
But I can play devil's advocate for a second and say data is great. And to your point of the example of the CEO, awesome that you have the data and that will help, or that will create fundraising and funding. But it's not a direct path either. There is a couple steps in between the data and having the data and accurate and having good data,
sure.
accurate data, positive data, and funding, right? Typically, there's a story that's involved as well too. Is that something you think is an important part of as you're collecting data, we have to think of a story along the way? Or is that just a separate phase that you get to once you have all the data first and then, worry about that part later?
No, no, no. They are as equally important, the head and the heart. So if you think about qualitative and quantitative, objective and subjective, whatever way you want to label this, there's the data that adds up and the data that makes you feel a certain way. And I simply summarize that as head and heart. Every boardroom has head and heart in it. There is an objective person in that room that needs to see the math correctly. How much did we spend? How much did we raise? How many people did we inspire? Right? There's some objective information that people really care about. Makes sense. That's never going to move me. I'm on plenty of boards. Objective information, P&Ls there's no emotion involved in them. It is simple, read, understand, move on. Don't need to think much. On the qualitative side, you got to really think about why and how do these stories manifest. So I think about like the analog of gun violence in the United States, right? Everybody can intimately understand that guns can do bad things, right? And then when you look at the 25,000 people infected by gun violence a day, blah, 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 you start to lose people in the anonymity of the story. But if you tell a story about one person who was affected by gang violence in your neighborhood or gun violence in your neighborhood, your zip code, all of a sudden the intimacy changes, the listening changes, the feelings change. There's like some, so you need to be able to put story into anything that has objective data in it. The easy way to think about it is no stories without data, no data without stories. Right? You need to be able to, no numbers without stories, no stories without numbers. Another way to put it. You need to be able to say, this is what's happening. Look at this cool thing that's happening. And here's the objective data that backs it up and puts bass in our voice about why we do it. That same example I just gave you about the nonprofit leader in San Diego that I talked to, he was formerly a tech executive. And he also said, when I was in tech, all we led with was objective data. The story was the objective data. And then when I got into the social enterprise space, I realized that my same skills were relevant, but my positioning was backwards. Because if I go into a social enterprise conversation about nonprofits and I lead with objective data only, he's like, I felt like I was a tech guy living in social impact. And so what happened was I had to realize that the story started it, the people, the heartbeats, the pictures started it, and then the objective data brought it home. And so he had to reposition the way he did his own pitch, his own selling internally, all that stuff. And I thought it was really thoughtful. And so to me, whenever we live on spreadsheet only in data, you're losing the room because your board doesn't, I promise, no matter what board it is, there's someone in that room saying like, and why do we do this? And who's it affecting? And why? And so that's what we try to do is teach organizations to marry those two things as equal partners. If you have objective data, if you have subjective data tied to an impact framework that says, who do you serve? What do you serve them with? What's the quality of that service? Is anybody better off? And how does it relate to the greater community? Well, now you've put a moat around your why. This is our why. This is how we look at it. This is the information we look at to determine whether we're effective. And this is how we share it with you so you can be inspired to come on board with us. That then becomes aligning and it gets people off of this, we do because we do, or we're chasing this metric because it looks cool. And that's what we're really trying to do is get rid of performative behavior in this space because there's no need for it.
Hey, Alex here. I want to take a brief moment and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode so far, please consider sharing it with someone who would also benefit from its insights. It's these kinds of referrals that really help the show grow. You can also show your support by making a small donation. I don't do corporate sponsorships or product placements, so I rely on your support to keep the show going. You can visit my website, agentsofnonprofit.com, and click Support Us in the top menu. Thank you kindly.
That why question is something that's exceptionally important. I mean, in the nonprofit space, in the Salesforce, as I'm building systems,
sure,
when they ask for certain things that they want to get done, I often ask why. But then I ask a second why, a why to the why, and then a third, you keep on going downward until you get to the real, what I believe is the real why. Sometimes it takes up to 5 whys.
The 5 whys, love it.
Is there something from your perspective that is that something that you would align with as well? Or is one why enough? How does a story, how many whys do you believe to be able to make sure that the story fits your narrative and that they all supply each other and there's that beautiful feeding circle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the 5 whys I love. I love that exercise. Always have. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm verbose. I talk. I've been asked before to do the why to get a little bit more distilled and pointed. However, I'm also asked a lot to come out and tell stories. So there's a tension in that sometimes. But in the function of the 5 whys, I also add the layer of close your eyes and do it. Because when you close your eyes and do it, all of a sudden it's if you watch somebody do the 5 why exercise in front of you, they tend to do this. They're looking around, they're kind of looking. They're looking for the answer because it's you're asking them to take big idea down, 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 down to its most pointed, right? So they look. When I say close your eyes, it's interesting. And folks are like, okay, well, I want, and it becomes like they almost look down in themselves, right? And that's the exercise. What it's trying to say is, what are we trying to get out of this? To me, I don't care if it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The idea is, can you get it so clean and precise that you can own it? That's the problem. We tend to get talking points available for others to palate. No, my friend, it's about you owning your message. And if it takes you 1 or it takes you 20, I need to get you dangerous with your words. You need to be able to say, this is my why, and this is how I do it. I often call it bass in the voice. How do I help you get that bass in your voice about what you do? Because when you're going to talk to a funder or a parent in your program or a high school principal for the program whoever it is, they're going to want to know that you have command over what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it. And that 5 why exercise allows people to get that down to its most basic. I'm not running this enterprise so that every kid in the world can juggle and have fun and see the butterflies. I might be saying, you know why I do this? So I can get capital to community quicker, period. Because if I can get capital to community quicker in the hands of the right nonprofit executives, then communities can win. What does win mean? Win means be gainfully employed. Right? Because I've gone through my 5 whys to be able to say this to affluent philanthropists, community-based organizers, nonprofit podcast folk, but I have to be able to quickly get them to understand why my why fuels my motions and ties back to what it is that I think I am as a leader in this space.
I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who within a nonprofit organization should know and be able to communicate the whys? Is it everybody at every level? Is it just more your senior? Is it more the people who are ground level? What's your opinion?
Oh yeah, it's everybody, and you need an enterprise to be aligned. We don't need to drink the same Kool-Aid, right? There's talking points. Sure, we exist to do, this is how we know, there's those things, the mission, the vision, important, all very important. But my why, for why I move in social impact, is tied to pain, right? That I experience as an educator that is unique to me. And that drives me and keeps me disciplined in my movement. So my why might differentiate from others, but our aligned purpose of this mission at the company is aligned and collective. But if you don't have your associates understanding the why behind the work, and you only have your, for lack of a better word, talking head executives knowing the details, well, then how do you get those associates to storm the hill with you? How do you inspire them to be aligned if they have a different message than what the CEO does or I think you set yourself up for leaking, like leaks in a dam. When you have staff members that aren't bought into the work or don't align with it, and they're just there as a piece of the machine, there's a function for that, sure. But I'm always trying to get folks to understand that, this is who we are. We align here, we work here, we agree to this is our mission, vision. How do we align on our values and keep it rocking? And then you have to be consistent over time. And then people tend to follow until they can own it themselves. But yes, everyone should be bought into the why of the work.
There was once a time I was working for an organization, and the CTO was inspiring in that way. He was able to rally the troops toward a particular direction. And it felt like the whole team, or at least most of the team, everyone that I was around at least, was aligned with that. And we believed in it. We were our own little mini champions, so to speak. Sure. And I mean, I can't say how the direction was great. It may not be perfect, but it's a direction. And we were all heading in there. And there was an alignment that I really loved and appreciated. And I learned that after I left, that gentleman had left as well, too, and they kind of lost their way. And then people started losing part of their motivation. And the new guy was had different ideas, and that lost that kind of alignment. So I totally agree with that. As many people as you can get within your organization aligned to the same cause, it is a fantastic thing to do.
And you got to reinvest in it. That's the thing that people
It's a
lose.
repeating. Yeah, you don't do it once and let it go. You have to keep on
It's not
feeding
set
it.
it. Back in the day, Ron Popeil used to sell set it and forget it, like the dehydrating machine that you could make beef jerky with. Set it and forget it. That was his joke. That's not people. Like, especially not people post-COVID, post-pandemic. Now people are in virtual, hybrid, etc. We don't have the same intimacy, connectivity. We're not in the hallway to walk down to get the beer. Like all these things that we used to leverage to keep people like, oh, okay, Stephen's still a good guy. I still believe in him. I see him. You don't understand what a person's going through anymore in a virtual world. So you got to invest in constantly and not over-indexing on it, but it can't be a once a year type activity to keep the troops excited about what we're up to. Right? You got to make sure they see that in your leadership, in your effort, etc. Hopefully in your strategy. And us as a startup still that's getting out of that, right? I mean, we're a startup in the sense that we were funded from a family office and created this business, and now we're finding our footing over time. What got us here isn't going to sustain us. And what got that staff here isn't going to sustain them. You got to be able to make sure they understand that, like, yeah, we're here. Yeah, we're doing this. This feels neat. But what about if we execute on this next vision and we go here? And now we're able to get capital to communities quicker. What does that feel like? Right? You have to invest in that inspiration internally and externally, because as soon as you get some people not pulling the same direction, like, it gets a little harder. And then you get people pulling the opposite direction, it gets really hard. And then now we're stressing and testing and we're not all going on the same song sheet and that harmony conversation we tried to talk about earlier. So it's a constant reevaluation and effort there.
So let's move on to then barriers, because it's great. Everything sounds, roses and stuff like that, but there's obviously barriers and challenges along the way. So I'm curious to know, in terms of, like, there's obviously technical challenges, making sure you've got right data, accurate data. Of course, if you don't have accurate data, if it's not trusted data, I mean, you're already dead in the water. Let's assume that's kind of working itself out. If it hasn't, I mean, you have a technical problem, but it's not a messaging problem, or it's not a, what do we do with this data once we have it? And that's the part that I was hoping to ask next is, okay, now that you have the data, it's accurate, it's fairly trusted, what are the next steps? Maybe you've already started the story toward it. But I mean, typically there are other kinds of barriers that you might see that you have to help organizations get past. And I was wondering, what are those barriers?
Sure. So I'll start a couple ways on that. We specifically use a framework called DCAL, define, collect, analyze, leverage, right? So you've defined your information, you've collected the data. Now there's the next step is the analyze and leverage. So you're going to analyze it for what? What are you trying to learn? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to be more informed about your efficacy? Are you trying to figure out the next place to expand, maybe to contract, whatever it is? So we work with our clients to understand that. That's the analyze side. The leverage side, well, now you have it analyzed, and now you're seeing your gaps and your opportunities and all these things. Leverage is what are you going to do with it? We're going to go next, right? So that process, I'll get off that for a second, because that process is designed to help people get out of those barriers that are in their way, right? Oftentimes a nonprofit's barrier is, I don't want to be too honest about what's not working, right? And that, to me, is not their fault. And I'm not saying that to gas them up and make them feel nice. It's because this system they're in rewards them for telling people what they want to hear. Philanthropy, oftentimes in the past, says things like, how many people did you give meals to? Tell me how many people you gave meals to. Did you give it to 100 people or 1,000,000 people? 1,000,000 people? Ooh, that's great. We like that. We can now claim that as, look what we did in philanthropy. We funded this. So like the behaviors are incentivized by the funder. That's how it's gone to date. And to me, that is what's broken, because those funders aren't the ones that are social enterprise geniuses that run those social enterprises, that may give out meals, that may work on homeless abatement. So the barrier oftentimes is a nonprofit might be doing some great work. And I mean great work in the sense of noble community work, whatever that is, giving out meals, youth empowerment, whatever it is. But that stuff takes more than the 1 year cycle that tax status allows you, right? So when you're funded by a philanthropy that usually moves money in 1 year increments tied to tax status, then you need to see movement in that year. Well, literacy, homelessness, obesity, those things aren't remedied in a year. So then becomes the quagmire for a nonprofit to find something that they can own that moved in a year that is sexy enough to get that investment to continue. That's tough. That's awful. That like forces people to test their integrity. Because now I got to say, well, dang, I didn't give out 1 million meals, but I also got to pay these I got to pay my staff. Maybe we'll, and then you move the goalpost and you say, well, we prepared to give out 1 million meals in year 2. So you do all these things that get cheeky, and it stops you from being candid and saying, no, social impact isn't a J curve, homie. It ain't. It doesn't move like that. It takes time. So the relationship is so essential, because if I have a relationship with my funder, they're more likely to understand my candor when I share with them, this is what we're doing, this is how it looks, this is how we're tracking and measuring towards outcome, but also being mindful of pivots along the way. To me, the biggest problem and impact is we've got to validate versus learning. It's about learning. And if we think of learning, then information, good and bad, is fuel. But if it's about validation assumptions, then the only thing that's good is good data that speaks to our assumptions, right? And so that's, to me, the barrier. So as we move to get more people in relationship, working together, talking, besides just sending in reports that say, I did this many times to get this outcome, and now you guys should be happy. That's not a relationship. That is a transaction, which can be a part of a relationship. So those are the barriers, like funders not being open to learning. They're actually open to, give me my report, streamline this so I can continue to keep the machine moving on my side, which says, I was a program officer. I gave out $10 million. I chose all the right bets to give it to, and they all did great. And now look at what we've solved, right? That's what I'm trying to pop a bubble in. That's what UpMetrics is trying to pop a bubble in. That kind of nonsensical behavior that doesn't end up in better outcomes for society. It ends up in gatekeeping. It ends up in siloed relationship. It ends up in all these other things that aren't necessarily the best. And so those barriers are some of the things that we really I try to live in and push into. Our company work tries to push into. And it comes from some of the power dynamics that exist in philanthropy and nonprofit.
I love the idea of sharing what you've learned, because I agree that sometimes, most of the time, what you're trying to solve cannot be solved in a year. And there's going to be mistakes that are going to be made. And I've asked a previous speaker, about communication, talking to your funders, and they basically said it's a good idea to communicate the failures as well.
Yes.
Because transparency it's all about relationship building and having that transparency and being vulnerable. But if you can position that failure, I'm using failure in quotes, of course, and it might be a real failure, but I mean, it did not succeed in the goals you were hoping to achieve for the year. But if you can balance that or offset that with the learning lessons, that actually makes it much easier to digest and say, okay, well, no, we didn't quite accomplish this, but we did learn these things don't work. These things, seem to resonate. We're going to spend more time doing those. And you can start crafting in your story so that it becomes inspiring, so that hopefully in the following years, things will get improved. But in addition to that, there's also going to be a cutoff, right? You can't be in a learning phase for 10, 20 years. You have to, at some point, have to have, even though it's not a J curve, you do need to start having results. So playing devil's advocate again, if things aren't picking up in the way that you want them to, is there a way to either craft a message to say, hang on, we got this, don't give up on us just yet? Or maybe that's a signal to say a harder pivot is needed, or maybe go in a completely different direction.
Yeah, there definitely is. But it also has to do with nonprofits leveling up and them owning what they actually do. I keep giving education examples, but that's kind of my background. So it's like an elementary school teacher claiming graduation rates as a success point in their work, right? So when a fifth grade teacher, or fourth grade, whatever, elementary, primary, says 100% of my students graduate high school. Okay, well, between fourth grade and that final senior year of school, there's a lot of things that happen in between there. So are you claiming those because those what you owned, or did you play into it? You did play into it. You did contribute because you gave foundational primary, educational opportunities, yada yada yada. But you can't claim that your intervention helped guarantee a 100% graduation rate. That's what nonprofits tend to do. They get themselves in these positions where they're trying to get the money, so they throw something sexy at the RFP that it gets the attention, and now they're in this position of like, damn, I got to do that? Or what do you actually do, right? So you might not be able to claim graduation rates as a fourth grader, but you can talk about the foundations of education and how you put that in, and how if you did this and the rest of the education system did this, you contributed to blank. Contribution is important. Now you can speak to contribution, big global gains, honestly, with integrity, but also then focus on what do you actually do. Because I shouldn't be in a position as a nonprofit where I can't sit with whoever's funding me or my partner agency or whoever and say, this is what we aspire to do. This is what we actually did. This is what we learned. And this is what we're going to do more of or not more of based on that learning moving forward. And we'd like you to continue partner with us. This is why. If we can't do that, I'm sorry. You don't need to be in a situation where you're asking for more funding if you cannot do that. Now, if you don't know how to do that, that's okay. People can help you. Not just us, but other people can also help you. But it isn't about being some savant in pitching. That's not what a nonprofit executive is. That's what we've asked them to do because we've under-resourced the space so much. But no, they need to own what they do. Do you teach kids to juggle? Great. How do you do that? Why do you do that? What's the outcome of a bunch of kids being able to juggle? Great. If that's your bailiwick and that's what you own, then great. I'm sure there's somebody out there tied to wellness and belonging funders that would say, you know what? I juggled as a kid. That's pretty cool. I could see then there's a relationship and you can go from there. But what you then can own is your actual outcomes tied to what you said you were going to do. And then your data story can speak to that. The number of balls juggled, whatever, how many kids now work at the circus, whatever it is. Like, it doesn't matter. That's what I try to get people to understand in nonprofit work is you decide the focus based on your why. And I'm just trying to help you understand how you can truly own it in a way that allows you to not dance the jig for people and say I do something that I don't, but also stop dancing altogether and start living in what you do. And so that you can speak clearly about it to the continuum, to those outcomes that you say that everyone's trying to get to in their world. And then it's an ownership-based activity at that point. It's not telling you to be something you're not.
We've talked a lot about objective data, right? Number of balls juggled, number of people who went to play to the circus. I'm curious to know your thoughts on subjective data, like mood improvements or,
Love it.
how do you tackle that? Because it's not as tangible, let's say, as actual counts and numbers that you can just add up and multiply or whatever.
Yeah, the people that struggle with that are usually the people in power. That's who struggles with that. Because they want something that's simple, that masks out, that looks on a one pager that they can simply say, okay, great, cool, good, bad, indifferent, right? The gray, the folks in power struggle with gray area because they feel like someone's trying to teach. It's as important. A coworker or a board I'm on, and I will name them, Mentor California. I'm the board chair there, and the CEO is Marcus Struther. Bad brother, just unbelievable dude. He says, life data matters too. What he always talks about. He's like, sure, we can look at the spreadsheets and talk about how many and how much and what our goals were, sure. But it's like, if we don't understand the life data of who we're serving and their stories, then it doesn't give any context to the actual objective data I share with you. So we at UP, but also him, I go back to my head and heart story, to me, they got to be married. The subjective, qualitative information, how many smiles did we see, right? That's an actual data point for a client of mine. They track smiles as observed when they do walkthroughs of this youth community group a few times a year. They give people a simple chart. It's got smiley face, frowny face, and they're just tallying. And that's all they're doing is they're walking around tallying and they're tallying. And they leave at the end of it and they're like, wow, that's a lot of smiling kids. Well, that's a data point. It might not be you might not make $1 million investment off of that data point by itself, but that data point mixed with the anecdote of the young person saying, I don't just smile, but I smile because now I feel confident doing X. And now you have a video of that kid talking on your dashboard right next to your objective data. That now what happens, it's forcing those head and heart board members or leaders or team or program staff or whoever to look at those two things in context with each other. Wow, we're doing a lot of something, and look at the impact on the face of one kid. And now, what happens if we had 50 kids that we got feeling like this walking on a campus daily? What happens to the campus of a school? What happens to the environment? Because now human testimony can kick in and say, wow, when I'm smiling and I feel more confident, things are better. Well, what happens if a bunch of little kids feel that way? Class is probably better, right? And so then they can connect the dots and see, oh, this nonprofit does that. Another one of my clients focuses on gratitude and fitness. Matthew McConaughey's foundation, Just Keep Living. Gratitude and fitness. Simple. Thank you cards. They teach young people how to write thank you cards and be grateful for opportunities in their lives, and also take care of themselves and eat well. Work out, take care of yourself, say thanks to the folks that are helping you out, keep it moving, just keep living, right? Very simple. And they don't need to measure heart rate, BMI, all these they can. That's not what they care to own, right? So we get back to that conversation we were having earlier about what can you own versus what can be done in a year. Own what you can, and then speak to over time what you hope to see happen and how you're longitudinally looking at things that speak to that. That's how you absolve yourself from having to get things done in a year when actually they're going to take more time, and you keep these folks invested in saying, we think by year 1, we'll probably see something like this. This is what we're going to look at. By year 10, we're going to trail on some of these folks and we're going to track this. And we hope you stick around to learn that too. But it shows that you have a strategy long-term and short-term to understand this stuff over time.
Every speaker that comes on here, I ask them about AI because it's now, of course, prolific. It's everywhere. It's having sometimes mega impacts, sometimes minor impacts. And I'm curious to know, in your space, how do you see data? Right. I know AI can, obviously analyze and summarize data. Great. Is there something beyond that you can use or seem to want to use AI for?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, right? There's a lot. To me, it's a nudge. It's a perpetual nudge. I think most humans struggle to move on their ideas, right? They just struggle because they got so many ideas. I'm looking at my to-do sheet here, my to-do sheet there, my to-do sheet there. I got a lot of things I got to do, right? I need a nudge sometimes to move on all of them. And so for me, AI, I look at it as a personal assistant to help me nudge into things. Give me something simple I can move on this project today that I can own. Things like that allow the human to move. That's personal. On the professional side, in the space, yeah, I mean, look, it's matching. It's finding the right investment. It's finding the right people. It's being a little bit more pointed as a researcher. You can actually ask it pretty simple questions and give you kind of breadcrumbs on where to spend your time. So if a nonprofit's looking for things like a list of funders that fund capacity building for youth-serving organizations, you now don't have to have a membership at some software listserv that allows you that access that is 1 year old, right? You can actually get some breadcrumbs and do some of your own research. I'd also say the idea about the annual report, that thing I talked about earlier. Annual report is kind of a joke in nonprofits. They hate them. It's expensive. It takes forever. Funders never read them. Well, now AI can help you write those annual reports in a second, right? Take away some of the sausage making that's taking your joy away from your life and your work, right? And I go back to getting your time back. If you could get nonprofit executives simply to no longer have to do the performative nonsense of an annual report, which takes 2.5 months during the late Q3, early Q4 is an expensive thing. Someone gets burdened with it. And then we get this beautiful thing that nobody reads. It's performative 101. If you could solve that for nonprofit executives across the country by AI and just taking that pain away, Now, what are you going to do with your time? So to me, it's an enablement play for more time to do things that you want to do. Look, there's a lot of other super sophisticated things it can help you do, but I don't think this space needs more sophistication. It needs more logic. It needs more simple. Needs more why. Why are we doing this? What are we doing it for? And then clarity about how you articulate that. So, but the other thing I would say is notes. I think there's pattern identification that AI can help nonprofits with that I don't think they always do. Like I think sometimes because you're wearing 10 hats as a nonprofit executive, or you have a small staff, not all, but a lot. I think usually what gives is like the innovation and ideation part of it because you're fundraising or you're doing these other things or backfilling roles. And so I think sometimes there's these great notes and things that we capture and then we just turn the page. How can you start to do pattern identification in your notes to say, I bet you if you go through the last 30 pages of your notes and meetings you've had, there's something there that's consistent that you're missing on. So I think that's one of the things that I would really suggest nonprofit execs do is take those inevitable stack, and I'm looking at 4 of mine, of notepads that we take handwritten notes on and see about, what is it, OCR, and these are kind of softwares that allow you to read it quickly and help you. I think there's some stuff there maybe to explore as well.
So just a footnote about notes is in the past, I'm talking maybe a couple of months ago, the way that I used to run the podcast, right, is I would have a pre-chat with them before we even get to the recording. In the pre-chat, I would have write down in my own little note keeper here, it's digital, a bunch of topics that we talked about. And then a few days before the actual recording is when I pull up these notes and I come up with a list of questions to ask my guest. The way that I work today with AI is in that pre-chat, I have the Zoom has an AI companion that can summarize everything for me. So all I'm doing is actually engaging in the conversation. I'm not taking any more notes anymore. I'm actually present, mindful, and making sure I come up. The AI companion will give me all the notes that I could ever need and more. And then I just take that, I put it into another AI that says, here is my notes from this pre-chat. Come up with some interesting questions to ask this person who will be a guest on my podcast. And, it comes up with a whole bunch of them. Sometimes I like, sometimes I don't, but I just pick and choose that I want. That effort, which took, I don't know, maybe an hour, let's say in total, now it takes me like 10 minutes, maybe less, I don't know. So it's just one simple way of using notes to just augment and simplify your life without getting too technical.
I have a very similar approach with that. Very similar. And the other thing I do is I'll have it, I'll use my personal ChatGPT arm to say, basically, why would you hire me or why would you not hire me with this information? Like I kind of run my pitches through it, like my proprietary one, not the public ones, of course, but to say things like, why will this person say no to what I'm about to ask them? Because I think one of the things I talk about game film a lot, like I'm a PE teacher and a basketball coach. And I think if you look at film or you look in the mirror, there's feedback that's strong. And I think people want to role play to get that feedback of doing something simulating live. Well, I think there's something that can be done with these AI engines if done proprietarily, where you're not putting out personal stuff and proprietary work stuff in the wrong spaces, that can help you galvanize your approach for this next meeting you're going to have, or this pitch you're going to have, or why would they say no if I put it at this price point? Give me 3 like there's nudges, there's little things that you can do. You can almost create like a little buddy to help you, kind of like your accountability buddy. And I think to your notes point, the one thing I would say about your notes point though is, for me, writing is kind of catharsis. So certain things I want to write, and so I'm exploring all the digital versions of like trying to write on an iPad, but it makes too much noise, or trying to look at Remarkable or all these other tools. So like I'm almost to the full digital note thing, but there's a piece of me that still likes to do pen and paper for some stuff. And I don't know if there's any relevance anymore, honestly.
There is. And I'll tell you, as we're talking here today, I am actually writing notes in my notepad, pen and paper, so that I can make sure I track of what has been said, conversations or topics or key points. And to me, it is important to write because it's soundless. There is no keyboard clicking away as we're talking too. And I think you're right. There's something cathartic about still being hand on paper type of situation. So there is a room for still being human, but some things can and should be automated. Cool.
Sure.
In terms of then, so another theme, or the theme the main theme of this podcast in general is about superhero and superpowers. And I'm curious to know if you had a superpower or a magic wand, whatever you'd like to call it, that could change something in the space that you see, what would it be?
Can I give you two? I would say, it was the ability to empathize with the partner. And I'm not saying for funders to empathize with nonprofits or nonprofits to empathize with funders. It doesn't matter. It's whenever there's a collaborative need, like where there's government, private, person, company, where there's two things need to work together, there needs to be a true understanding of empathy, of being able to think about what that person experiences on their side, not just what they can do for me. And I live in that. I've always lived in that. I don't have a lot of hard skills. I got a bunch of soft skills, but I don't have a bunch. I'm not a savant coder. I'm not some finance wonk that can spin sheets, and I don't have those skills. I have a bunch of other soft and relational skills that are important, but I need to collaborate to get cool things done. And the way that I tend to collaborate is through the lens of empathy, always. Like, obviously, it makes sense. There's strategy. You do something that I want to be closer to, so thus we can find the opportunity. But I think that, but I also think the ability to absolve yourself from validation and perseverate in learning. Because in this specific space, nonprofit, philanthropy, learning is the goal. You've got to learn so that we can codify. And then once we can codify it, then we can fund it. Then we can scale it as appropriate with the investment from philanthropy or potentially government. Philanthropy should be the R&D for social change. That's where the money, the disposable money lives. It lives in philanthropy. If we took this idea of philanthropy's capital and thought that's the fuel in the hands of nonprofits to fuel social change and improvement, now we're looking at things different than this transaction of tax dollars, tax-free dollars, nonprofits, due diligence, all these other things that kind of get in the way. So if we empathize with the other side and understood what they're trying to do and how they do it, and then understood what we're trying to do and how we do it, mixed with a little bit of consensus and like coming to consensus of like, what am I willing to give and give up? What are you willing to give and give up so that we can work together? I think then you turn on the validation, getting rid of that and go into learning, you really have something. Because then folks can learn and actually use information to fuel the next things that they're doing, more of iterations, pivots, whatever. But also they can empathize with the partners that help get them there. That goes a long way in those relationships being sound. And so those are the long answer, long empathy, empathize, and get off validation and get into learning.
Stephan, this has been great. Lots of insights here. Could you please share your contact information so that if people have questions, they can reach out to you?
Sure. Best way to get to me is either through email or through LinkedIn. Stephen is my first name. Minix is my last name, Minix. If you look me up on LinkedIn, you can find me there. I'm obnoxious. I'm always talking about something, gardening or something there, but I'm a pretty good follow there. And I do tend to talk a lot in that space about making this world better. Or my email address, which is my first name, Stephen, at upmetrics, UPMETRICS.com, Stephen at upmetrics.com. Either way, LinkedIn or there, you can get to me. I do not scan emails. I'm active. I am on it. If you drop me a line, I'll reach back out for certain. And I'd love to be a support if I could.
And I apologize. I said Stephan because one of my best friends is Stephan. It's Stephen.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
Sorry about that. So Stephen, thanks again. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for doing what you do.
Appreciate you. Thanks for time and the space.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa. I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.